Hello and welcome to this month's drawing tutorial. This month we're going to work on expression. So start by printing out the reference of this baby with a very surprised expression and measure the height and length of your drawing reference drawing square here. Then make a proportional square, larger or smaller or even the exact same size, on your drawing paper. I always like to go a little bit larger. Then I like to make the grid marks. Just measure the length to begin with. Give yourself a mark for the exact medium. Measure that in half and that half and half again, so that you come up with 8 increments on the top. Then do the same exact thing to find the side increments. Label those alphabetically on one side. So for instance, top and bottom alphabetically, left and right sides numerically. And then label those the same way on your drawing paper. I've done all that work off camera because it's just time consuming. There's nothing much to learn about drawing from doing it. But that's the mathematical procedure that you have to start with to get a really good, accurate grid that you can use for laying out this drawing. So next we're going to start the actual drawing part. And to do that I'm going to use some charcoal pencils. And I like to use a sandpaper block like this when I'm working with charcoal, because constantly sharpening wastes so much of the wood and the length of the pencil. So this way I just have a nice sharp tip. I'm going to sharpen up the tip on this charcoal pencil here. And then use a architectural triangle like this. Line it up on the side. And then you're going to find the top of the head, make my little mark on the side of the grid there, and the bottom of the chin. Make sure that you're always using the triangle so that your lines are nice and square. And then the side of the face, you have to be really careful on this one so that you're measuring something that you'll remember what it refers to. I like to do the outermost edge of the ear, or the outermost point of the side of the face. And just mark down where that bisects the graph. And same thing on this side, outermost side of the hair. It's right there. Okay, then I'm going to translate those measurements to my drawing paper. So about here is going to be the top of my head. Top of the head is right around here. Then the bottom of the head, that was a 7.5. I'm making kind of a long hatch line, and I'm making it really light so that I can erase it, because I know I'm going to need to erase all of these early marks. And then about here for the side of the ear, and you also need to keep the horizontal in line as well. That's why I'm just making really long marks right now that I know are in the approximate right place. And then C.5, a little bit closer to the C than the D. Nice and square. Put it there. Then, once those are in line, or once those are marked down, I can start to sketch the large shape of the baby's head within those guidelines. Now this is the top of the hair. So when I'm sketching it, I need to remember that and make sure that I don't act as though that's the top of the head and then push the hair even farther. Then your head is going to wind up being too long. See, so just make sure when you're using these grid marks that you're using them effectively by making sure you always know what they refer to. And then he has kind of his chin comes down to a little point right there. So already I have a very general idea of the head, but what I know about this head is that it fills the right amount of the page. It's in the right place on the drawing paper, and it's the right size to keep it proportional with the reference, because I used my grid to lay it out. So then I'm going to sketch in the body really quickly. Baby's body is easy, there's not much detail to it yet, and you can just use the points that it intersects at the bottom of the grid and the head looking across, so it's right at about 6. See this? But if I need to be more precise, I'll just take out that architectural triangle again and see exactly where that is. Oh, let's see, it's a little below the 6. And then this one, about right here, 6.5. And it should be at about a little past the D mark. Okay, so D and a little bit, and the 6.5 between the 6 and 7 here comes up with this mark. And then let's find the horizontal mark for this one. Okay, now I can use those measurements to know exactly where the shoulders are going to intersect the head. So here's where it's intersecting the graph. Then I know my 6.5, my 6.25. It's going to be about here. And then F and 1/4, yep, so that's about right. So as you can already tell, this is the most exciting part of drawing. No, it's not. It is boring. But it's really important that you're patient with yourself and you do this part of, effectively, because the fewer mistakes you make at this point, the faster the rest of it will go, and also the more accurate, the most accurate it will be. The more accurate it will be. So do take your time, do a good job laying out all of these guide points. And then, like I said, I'm just going to use where the baby's arm bisects the outside of the graph, like here. And here. And then use that in conjunction with this point that I found. Sketch in the shape of an arm, and then this other arm. And then sometimes after you have got the basic placement, you can erase that line and redraw it with greater accuracy. There. Okay, so the baby's head is looking too big. Let's make sure that we are drawing head and not hair sticking off the head. I'm putting in a few more. Now remember, this line was the very outermost point of the ear. And the bottom of the ear on the right side should line up with the 6, and on this one it is just below the 6, so his head's at a slight angle. So let's say just below the 6 is here, just above the 6 is here. And we start to sort things out a little bit more. So the head is coming in about this amount. I'm just going to make my rough guesses. Erase my drawing lines once I know they're incorrect and redraw them correctly, and just clean it up as you go along. And then once you have accurate shapes on the paper, so you can start to use other shapes to be guidelines for the shapes you already have. So the ear, I can look at this shape here of the ear sticking off the head, and this negative shape, the distance from this crux to the bottom of the ear, to help me gauge if I've placed it correctly on my drawing. And then his little hairs are going to stick out about here. Okay, so that's feeling more like a proportional baby head to body. So now we have to place some guidelines for the features. So the eyes, the bottom of the eyes, if I have a line that touches the bottom of both eyes, it does not go straight across, because again, the head is at an angle. So it's going to go here and here. This is another great reason for having a grid, because when things are at an angle, it can be very, very tricky to put them down accurately. Then I'm going to put the other line on the top of the eyes, right on the eyelashes, and then I have it at 4 and right under the 5. So now let's translate those. Right under the 5. That'd be about here, and that makes sense because that's in line with the ears. And then the other one was right below the 4 and right about here. Very good. Then let's get an angle for a line that goes right between the eyes and through the center of the nose. Right here. So this side of the E and then the right side of the E. About right like this. Very, very lightly, I draw it down. And then the bottom of the nose, let's find that one as well. Right under the 5, about 6.5. We're almost getting done here because I have the top of the mouth. Right under the 6 and right over the 6. And the bottom of the mouth. The bottom of the mouth slopes down sort of in a funny shape. So rather than find that funny shape, I'm just going to find one square line. So if I get it right under the 7, as the lowest part. And this would be about here. Okay, now I know the placement of all of the general features. So now I can do the much more fun job of sketching these out. So let's find the inside of the eye here. Inside of the eye should be about E. And then this inside of the eye should be at about there. Okay. So once I know all of this information, I can just block out the shapes of the features and it becomes a lot faster and more accurate, because here, see, I've given myself squares for the eyes, so then I can just quickly sketch in the shape of those eyes. And I know that they're going to be the right size, on the right place on the head, and equal size to each other. So all of the major problems that you have with drawing eyes are already gone simply by the fact that I have laid them out with a grid. Nose, I have the place, I have it bounded in the same way. I know where the center line should be, I know where the outer edges should be, and I know where the bottom of it should be. So then within those guidelines, I just draw myself a little baby nose like this. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the mouth. I know where the angle of the bottom lip should be. So now I just have to sketch the shape of this mouth a little bit more accurately. See, once you know where everything goes, look how simple that is. It comes together so quickly. So let's erase some of those guidelines, and then you're going to make the features more concrete. This is why it's so important to draw lightly, because you're going to need to erase all of your lines at least once, really, if not 2 or 3 times. So once I have these shapes drawn in, I can draw them a little bit with a little bit more detail. So once I have the large shapes drawn in, I can add details like this. So I'm drawing the iris. It's just almost a perfect circle because the baby's eyes are open so wide. And then within that circle, there's another circle. Then don't forget that skin above the eyelid, the upper eyelid. Now a lot of the expression is going to come through the eyes, so this is where you need to be really careful when you're drawing expressive faces. It's really easy to change the expression by messing something up in the iris or the pupil. So surprise is one of the easier expressions to draw, just because you get to draw an entire visible circle for the iris. It's more common for people to be trying to draw a different expression and make the person look too surprised because they've shown too much of the iris. Now I'm going to go and I'm just paying close attention to my reference material to make sure that I get the shape of the nostrils down correctly. and to make sure that I get the shape of the lips and all of these little individual things completely correct. And then I'm doing just a really light line of where the baby's eyebrows are going to be. And again, where some of that hair is going to be standing up. Okay. So let me go off camera now for a few minutes and clean up those shapes a little bit more. Let it rest and go back and make any changes if I feel like things don't look quite right. Because before we move on to adding any skin tone, the features need to be exactly right and in the right place, the right shape and everything like that. Once you add the skin tone, it's a lot harder to erase lines without making a big interruption. So I'm going to go away. I'm going to put my drawing away for a little while, come back to it with fresh eyes so I can see any mistakes, and when I come back to you, we'll be ready to put down that first layer of skin tone. Okay, I am done with my rough sketch here, or the outlines of all the features. So now I'm going to tape off the edges and indent the hairs. I always tape off the edges, especially when I have a dark background like this one, because it will give me really clean, precise margins at the end, and that looks really nice. And you'll notice I'm using some painter's tape. This is a low tack paint. This is a low tack tape that won't damage your paper. If you don't have any painter's tape, then make sure that you stick your masking tape to your clothes a couple of times before you put it to your paper, or it will tear. See, now I don't need my grid anymore because all the drawing is done. From here on out, it's just all about adding the tone. Now to indent the hairs, I'm using the stylus. This is a clay stylus, but I use it because it's perfect for indenting paper. It has a sharp tip, one that's finer than the other, and it will indent the paper cleanly without tearing. So I'm just going to go around the head like this, scratching over the surface of these hairs that right next to the ones that I already drew. I drew them not because they'd stay visible in the drawing, but because I wanted to get a really good sense of how they'd look. And make sure that you do some on the inside of the hair as well. Otherwise, those indented hairs will tend to look like a weird outline. Move your hand or move the paper as you work to make sure that you have the maximum amount of control. Move your hand or your paper as you work so that you are always in control and your strokes are very comfortable. See, I'm going to indent some hairs on the inside of the hairstyle here too. Kind of swept over his face, and that way it will look more unified. Then we're going to start putting in that really dark background. So in this phase, just start at the top and use back and forth strokes like this. I might even go with the softer charcoal pencil. Yep, because it's really, really black. So I'm using a 4B charcoal pencil here. Just something soft and black. You don't need to worry about the numbers. And I'm going to go back and forth, side to side, not scribbling. And then see, when I get close to those hairs, they stand out really nicely because of the indentations. I'm going to do a portion here so you can see after you have worked and worked and filled in all of this tone, then you're going to go back with a large tortillon so that you don't pick up any of that darkness. If you use a stomp, then you'll tend to lighten everything. See how carefully I go around the ears and around the edge of the face with a nice sharp pencil, pushing really hard. That gives me a very clean line. And you push as hard as you can so that you minimize the need for blending, because I'm already filling in the tooth of the paper with the pencil itself. See, just whoop. Make sure that you know where your lines are supposed to be, because you cannot change these. Once I'm sure, I just outline it like this with the pencil on the side, not the tip. And then I can circle stroke outward from there to make that line larger. And now it doesn't look like an outline anymore. And then let me show you what I'm going to do. Take a stomp, tortillon, blend over the top like this. Get right into the edges, keeping everything as black as possible. So let me do that for the entire background and then come back to you. When the background is done, you can start adding skin tone to the face. So you're going to start with a base tone, and that base tone is going to go over everything. So just make sure that you put down a clean piece of paper, start at the top. I'll shift my paper to make it more comfortable for me. Always do that, by the way. Start at the top in the hair and just work your way all the way down. See how I'm holding the pencil at the very back? That's so that I get the lightest touch possible. And I'm holding it on the side so that I access the entire flat surface of the pencil lead, or the charcoal stick, whatever you're drawing with. And just long, smooth strokes like this. This pencil's a little bit too hard. What I'm trying to do in this stage is just to get a fine charcoal dust over the surface. But I want it to be very, very light, because this is all going to be blended smooth to create a base tone. And the base tone is separate from the shadows, so this is the stage that you do first. Then we'll work the shadows up on top. Don't forget to get the hair as well. See how I'm going in one direction, and I'm sort of emphasizing the contours of the face and head as I work. Don't get any tone in the eyes. See my strokes curve back and forth the same way that the cheeks curve and the head curves. Do this until you cover all of the face, the head, and the body. Oop, got a little dark there. Hopefully that'll just blend out. When you're finished with that base tone, get a chamois cloth, wrap it around your finger at a clean spot, and then circle stroke to blend. See how the tone gets really light and really even. That's exactly what you're looking for. And then you're going to have a little bit of trouble when you get to those features because you want to blend as close to the features as possible, but you don't want to smear the lines completely away. So just do the best you can, and remember, you can always redraw those lines. In fact, we're going to have to. That's always a step that we do. So just get as close to them as you can. Be careful of that black background. You don't want to smudge into it and get a big black smear across your drawing. So just do this phase with care. Then you can go ahead and draw those features back out, and now we're starting our shadow phase as well. So in this phase, you're just re-emphasizing lines that you've already drawn in case they got lost during that blending phase. And while you're doing the rest of this work, I want you to always keep in your mind the fact that there are no lines on the face. Okay. It looks like the features have lines, especially around the eyes and the nose, but if you think about it, nobody drew that face in real life. The lines just appear to be lines because they're areas of strong contour and the light is bouncing off them at very sharp angles. So you get these sharp, distinct edges, but they're not lines. And because of that, whenever you put down a sharp edge, I want you to blend out one side of it with a smaller tortillon or stomp. And I also want you to make sure that you're continually doing everything you can to minimize the edge, to minimize the outlined look. Otherwise, when you reach the end of your portrait, it's going to look like a coloring book drawing. That might be really, really good, but it's still not going to look realistic. What we're going for in these is realism in our portraiture. Redraw the eyebrow up high the way I see it. And now I'm going to look for the areas of the shadow, the shapes of the shadow over the face. And to do that, I'm going to really closely scrutinize my reference material first. So I have this shadow here, it goes across, it goes around the eye, it goes around the nose. It falls on one side of this open mouth, chin, and then there's really dark under here on the neck. So let's try to put that all in as one big shape. Tilt your board. Add shadows in the hair. And when you add the shadows in the hair, make sure that you follow the direction of the hair growth, the natural direction. So here some hairs are sticking up, here some hairs are sweeping over. My strokes are going to follow both of those. Underneath here, it gets pretty dark. It's one of the darkest shadows on this face, and then this shadow goes all the way down into the eyebrow, Side of the eye, side of the nose. Side of the round part of the nose here. Straight on into the lip. See how the shadow is one big piece that falls over everything. Work the way I'm working and do that shadow all at once so that you don't wind up with a drawing at the end that looks piecemeal because it was worked on one feature at a time. We want everything to blend together. We want everything to look realistic. And so we need to put the shadows down as close as we can to the way that they actually fall on the face. Shadows and light fall on everything at the same time. So those pieces are going to link together. When you get to this area, I'm going to choke up on the pencil and I'm going to stabilize my hand so that I have a lot of control going around this outline. And then immediately I'm going to go to the flat side of the pencil on the side here and just fill in a shadow, making that thicker, 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 thicker. And then come on down like this. When I blend my shadows this time, I'm going to use a tortillon again. And I'm going to circle stroke to blend those shadows into the rest of the drawing. So let me take a little time off camera here and circle stroke around all of these shadows. Come back to you and I'll show you how to polish up the features. When you've blended those base tone shadows, then it is time to start picking out some highlights and cleaning things up a little bit more. So with cleaning up and picking out highlights, you're going to use a kneaded eraser. And the great thing about kneaded erasers is that you can squash them into different size points and blades so that you can pull out really sharp, clean edges, like in this eyebrow, wherever the highlights are hitting the eyebrow. And you can also smash it into a rounded edge like this, and I can pull out a little softer highlight on the tip of the nose, places like that. So you can just work around the portrait, pulling out some of those highlights, lightening up some of the smears. If those shadows are, if the shadow shapes got a little smeary during the blending process, this is the way you clean them up. Notice how I'm always keeping my hand off the page. I need to do that to make sure nothing smears. And then around the edge here, I can pull out a clean highlight, because as the face curves around, or as anything curves around on a contour like this, you're going to get a small edge of reflected light before it hits the darkest shadow shape. And I'm going to pull out some more highlights in the hair here. And some skinny little hairs. Ba-ba-bum. So I'm looking for still large shapes in this phase. Not necessarily doing tiny, tiny details yet. As you work on a portrait, you're always working from the large shapes to the small. So remember, when we were drawing it, we start with the large head, the large shoulders. When that is correct, then we add ears, the features to the face, When those are correct, then we add the large shape of the base tone, and now we are making those pieces smaller, with smaller shadows and more detail work. So the next phase here is to tighten it up even more, to get a nice sharp pencil and to start working in those features. So I'm going to sharpen the outline in the iris. I can see the outline on this, I can see this dark outline around the entire circle of the iris in this expression. And I'm going to add a very dark pupil, working around the shape of the highlight on the eye, which in this case is very square. So I'll just draw that highlight. And I can darken up the upper lid. And that upper eyelid. So the eyelid up here has two dark sides to it with a lot of outlines. Remember what I told you about outlining. So after putting that down, I'm going to use a stomp and just blend upward, blending out one of those edges. And then fill in the tone of the iris. Add some tone to the corners of the eye. See, I'm just doing that with a stomp. Then after the first blending pass, I might want to, he has really light blue eyes, so I'm just going to pull out a few of those spokes again with my kneaded eraser and add some tone around the shadow to clean, or the highlight rather, add some tone around that to clean it up so it looks nice and square like a shadow or like a highlight on an eye should. Maybe make those pupils a little bit bigger. And you can see how much realism is added just with those few steps. I'm going to do the same thing to sharpen up the nostril. So just go really, really dark here. Maybe add a bit of an edge, and then of course I'm going to soften that out because I don't want it to look like his nose has been outlined on the face. And I'm going to add some detail to the mouth because so far we don't have a lot of the tongue and the gums in here. So I'm just adding this tongue, reshaping the lips, and adding an intense dark to the top of the mouth here. And I like to draw the boundaries of my shadow shapes in cases like this, so I can just fill in without thinking about how far down to go. Don't go crazy, Sharon, yikes. And even when you're doing something like the lips that seems like it has a pretty distinct edge all the way around, keep it a broken line. Your eye doesn't need to see every bit of the line in order to just see a line really quickly, if that makes sense. So if you just indicate enough of the line, the viewer's eye will fill in the rest. Blend, 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 and then once it's blended, you can pull out some highlights on the tongue and on those gums and on the mouth. After you pull out the highlights, then you can darken up the shadows again, but it's this back and forth push and pull in this stage, where you're just gradually adding details to all of the features and sharpening up your shadows and highlights. So you're going to need your stomp, maybe a couple of different sizes, good sharp pencils, and your kneaded eraser. Keep those probably even just in your hand the whole time, because you constantly pass back and forth between those three implements. And this stage is a slow process, but it's very rewarding, especially if you've done the rest of it correctly and taken your time in the layout, because you're just going to see the realism pour into the portrait, like when you look at this eye now. And you know that your shapes are in the right place and they're the right size, so it shouldn't be frustrating, like I say, if you've taken your time in the layout phases. So let me just go off camera again here and add some details like this in the hair and in the features, sharpening things up, and I'll come back and show you how to do the very finishing touches, and we'll have this portrait whipped. After adding details in the features, this is what I've come up with. So it's just been blending, lifting, blending, adding tone. There are just a few things left to do here, and we will have a finished portrait. So first of all, you might see right away that down here we have a big block. We need to add the arm lines to break up that block. And I like to do this part last, just because down here I have to go really, really dark. So I do this after I've blended all the skin tone on top. And down here as well. Then just get a stomp or tortillon and drag upward from the shadow so that you get just a little bit of the tone. And then you're going to shade the inner side of that arm. Just like this. Circle stroke out. Looking good, baby. After blending, I might want to clean up that line just a little bit by adding some more tone. And sometimes I even pull out a slight highlight. Soften up the very ends of those lines so that they don't look like lines. Then I need eyelashes and eyebrows. So I'm going to protect the drawing with a clean sheet of paper, get a very sharp pencil, I'm sharpening the tip on my sandpaper block so it's just as sharp as I can make it. And then you're just going to stroke up, just like this. One stroke per lash. Don't make the eyelashes too hairy, especially since this is a baby. And since it is a baby, I'm not even going to add any lower lashes. But here, when I do this side, since I'm right-handed, I still want to be able to make the upward strokes. So I'm going to flip the paper around. And this feels more natural, so I can be in control and I'm not smearing the paper. See, it works really well. In the eyebrows, it's a baby, so we just have really, really light indications of the hairs in those eyebrows, because the baby hairs are very, very light. And on this side, I did a lot of those eyebrows in light already, so I used a kneaded eraser and pulled them out. So I'm just adding a few small accent lines. And then over the top, I'll use a used stomp with a soft side and just blend those hairs out at the edges. This is what I did for this area in the hair as well. See how it makes the hair look really soft, like a baby? That's what we're looking for. Okay. Oh, he's so cute. So let's take off our tape. I can still do work on the portrait after I take off the tape, but I know that I have everything done up to the edges. So I like to pull my tape off as soon as I can, just because I worry about things getting too sticky. So if I left it with the tape on in my sketchbook for a long time, that adhesive can get old and it can get gummy and it can ruin your drawing. So I just tend to take it off as soon as I can. Very nice. So here's the reference that we started with. Here's the drawing that we finished with. This is a really, really fun one to help you learn expression, because the baby features are so overdone that they're just a lot of fun to draw. I think you're going to really enjoy using the reference to make this one for yourself at home. So, this got a little bit smeary. What would I do next if I were going to sell this piece or something like that, is I would make sure to spray it with a fixative, probably a workable fixative at first. Then I'd put it away for a few days, making sure nothing is going to smudge it, take it out, and then do my last final touch-ups. Once I'm completely satisfied that the baby's as good as I can get him, then I'll do a final fixative to keep this super dark background from blending, and then ready for framing. So that completes this month's drawing tutorial. I hope that you've learned a lot about drawing expressions, and I hope that you have fun doing this one at home, and of course that you'll join me next month for another. Thanks so much for watching.